Good evening, everyone. We are 5 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get our meeting started. We're actually going to call to order our Animal Services Board. We have not met in person for quite some time, so I'm really glad to be able to go ahead and bring us all back better together to be able to go ahead and meet regarding this topic. This will be live streamed. So it is being put on YouTube. We're going to get a link to be able to go ahead and share that. We weren't sure we were going to be able to make that happen. The team just went ahead and told me and whispered in my ear that they were able to do that this evening. So we'll be able to be live streamed for the public. With that being said, my name is Matthew Colmeyer. You all should have a copy of the agenda. If not, we do have a couple of paper copies laying around over there by the doorway. And just want to make sure everyone's very familiar with the site that you're in. You're in the Fulton County Government Center complex. If you go out your door and hang a right, there's restrooms right around the corner down the hall there. Men's and women's restroom. There's an AED right outside of our facility here. If anyone runs into that situation, myself and Joe, we're both trained in first aid and CPR. We can go ahead and start the process. Someone can go ahead and gather the AED, and Alton and I would task you with being responsible for calling 911 and keeping it calm. If you could do that, keep it calm. If there is a fire alarms will go off. Our designated site will be down the staircase out in front of the county building by the fountain area, where all the media trucks are for the other thing that we have going on across the street at the courthouse. So that will be our area that we will go ahead and gather after we vacate this area and wait for it to be safe in that particular moment in time. So with that being said, I think we covered all the safety and security issues associated with that, and I will be turning it over to Alton Adams, our Chief Operating Officer of Public Safety, Technology, and as well as Justice. Thank you. I'm sorry. The thing that we try to go ahead and forget about from time to time. So folks, when you are speaking tonight, I do ask you to go ahead and get the microphone to be able to go ahead and turn it on so that the viewing public can hear what is being discussed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. First and foremost, let me welcome everyone. Someone was saying, well, geez, when's the last time you met? And I think in person it was, gosh, I can't even remember. Certainly pre-COVID. I think we may have had 1 or 2 meetings during COVID, not quite sure. I have long COVID, so I forget a lot of stuff. This is a big deal for us to have us meet in person. It's also a big deal because we have so many people who are now on the board, and I can't remember a time where we had everyone who was nominated here, and certainly in person, but showing up and active and committed to the cause. Just a little bit of background. I am a unabashed animal welfare advocate, dog lover primarily, but I love all animals except for iguanas. They kind of freak me out. But for the most part, I'm a big animal lover, and so this is as much about being a mission and a passion for me as it is a job. And I think you'll hear that from Matt and from Joe and others who are part of our team. It just transcends what we do from 9 to 6 every day. The agenda for today is pretty straightforward. You're going to hear a report from our partners at Lifeline. They've been our partners for quite some time, and so they are going to provide you, Rebecca and her team, and Audrey are going to provide an update on where things stand right now and how we've been tracking for 2023. You're going to hear a bit about kind of the current state of things, and then Matt is going to have perhaps the most exciting part of the agenda. He's going to talk about the new shelter. And the new shelter is scheduled to come online. I think we're going to get our certificate of occupancy sometime in September, and then we got a lot of things to do before we open, as is always the case at the 11th hour, but our target is sometime the end of October, certainly the 1st of November. And like I said, you'll hear more from Matt, but we are going to have the finest animal shelter in the Southeast U.S., and probably one of the best, if not the best, in the country. It's been long in coming, and it's something that we are extremely excited about. We started this process before COVID, and then we had to stop. We couldn't go to the bond market given everything that was going on, and then we had to start over, and everything was 20% more expensive, so we had to go back and fight some more money. And but it really, we've had a great team. In addition to Matt and his team, Bill Mason, who you'll meet at some point from Dream was the guy from the county that was managing all of this stuff kind of day to day, and he did a fabulous job. I know we're in the process of arranging for you to come see the facility, and I think when you see it, you're going to be proud to be part of the board. So we're going to hear from Matt. He's going to talk a bit about the facility, answer any questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible, and the goal for today is for you to walk away, one, with a clear understanding of kind of where we are as we sit here today in terms of animals and the statistics that we track and all the other good things that Rebecca and her team does. Give you a sense for what's going on with the shelter, answer any questions you might have, and really we got some specific household things that we need to take care of. I'm going to turn this over to Attorney Bowman in a minute, but we got to elect a couple of officers, and we set some schedules and so on. But here again, thank you. It's great to have you here in person. And we look forward to a very informative and engaging couple of hours.
Thank you, Alton. Appreciate the welcoming remarks. As he did allude to, my name is Matthew Colmar. I'm the director of the Emergency Management Agency here. One of my responsibilities is administrating the program of animal services, along with the Airport Fire Rescue Department, Emergency Management Office, and some other Department of Homeland Security programs that we run out of our shop. Joe Bereswain is the deputy chief of our organization. Joe has extensive public safety experience as well as animal services experience from his time back down in South Florida before he ran away to greener pastures up north in Virginia and then came back down like a ping pong ball. He's bouncing back and forth from north to south, but he's enjoying his time with us now here in the great state of Georgia. And then David Brown, and I don't see him in the room. Okay. Awesome. So David is the program coordinator working with the team, and he will be someone else that you'll see in the room or may get an email from him or get a phone call along those lines. So I just wanted to make sure you knew who our team members were. When it comes time for Lifeline, I'm going to ask Rebecca to make sure she introduces her team so everyone can be aware of that. To Alson's point, we are going to hear from your attorney, our attorney, but also this board's attorney, Mr. Bowman, and his team. He'll be walking you all through the bylaws that have been put in place in the past. It's been a long time since we've had quorum, so we have been unable to do anything associated with the bylaws or even to adopt them. We did in the past, but we need to go ahead and make sure that is put forth again, readopted, and also we have the necessary positions to be elected. So I will defer to him as to that, if that can actually happen tonight or if it has to be the first read and so on and so forth, so that he will be our parliamentarian as well as our leader in that regard and walking us through as to how we need to be compliant with that, and running through the agenda to make sure everyone is aware of that. And then we'll hear from Rebecca, like Alton did say. I'll talk a little bit about the new shelter and show some photos of that and discuss with you when can we offer a hard hat tour for the board. It will be at a times that we have to pick based upon the fact that it is still an active construction site, and more than anything, we want to get in there. So I am not going to allow us to delay construction so that we can have hard hat tours. We're going to be working around their schedule so that we can still go ahead and meet our ultimate goal, which is getting out of our 1978 facility into something that's actually in 2023's time period in construction. And then from there, we'll just have some open discussions, and then we'll close out the night. So with that being said, Brad, I'll ask you to go ahead and walk us through this process. I do have the bylaws up on the screen. Your attorney, Brad, will also be, Mr. Bowman will be sharing that with you all. And we will go ahead from here. So how would you like to proceed, sir?
Matthew, if I may, we have one other board member who is she close?
I don't think so. She's on the MP Street.
Okay, never mind. Proceed. I was going to say maybe we could flip it till she got here because this is pretty important. But let me pivot a little bit though. You have a cell phone number?
Joe's on phone.
Okay. I thought maybe she could listen into what's going on, even if she's not here in person, because it is a public meeting. That way, at least when she gets here, she'll be caught up. If that's okay. Was that okay, attorney?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. And as they said, I'm Brad Bowman. I'm the supervising counsel on the team that represents both emergency services and the Animal Welfare Board. I have with me today Sandy Monroe, who is also on the team, as well as our paralegal, Ms. Tanisha Holyfield. If you're having anything that you need to deal with that requires legal help, have questions about process or things like that, either Mr. Kalmar might direct you to us, or if you want to reach out to us directly, feel free to do that as well. But one of us should be at all these meetings, if not both of us. So it's a pleasure to be here. Happy to have everybody here in person. And I have the board's bylaws. I'm happy to read through them as well as having them up on the screen. So everybody will be able to have a copy going forward that you can always refer to, but of course you're always able to direct any questions to us that you might have as well. One of the things that is in here, but I'll point it out initially as a reminder, both the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act do apply to activities of the board. What that means is basically what we say and do is public information, publicly available. Obviously, people are entitled to both watch and attend the meetings, but records generated by the board are also public records as well, and available to the public if they so request them. Just a good reminder to, if you're dealing with any sort of business from the board, you want to do that on, if you have a device, you'll want to use your separate email account, certainly, for that. You want to try and use official document, either official devices if you have them, but also official emails and things like that, because that way you don't get it mixed up and have your own personal information potentially having to be looked at to determine what's board work and what's not. And so you may want to set up, if you don't have, I don't know from a technological standpoint if individual email accounts are provided to board members. If not, you may want to just set up a separate email account to deal with simply with the board work. That way, that's all that's in that account. So with that said, the bylaws, I'm happy to go through them. We have section 1, which is the purpose and responsibilities section. Fulton County has established the Fulton County Animal Welfare Hearing Board, which will be referred to as the board, to hold hearings provided for in Article 4, Chapter 34 of the Fulton County Code. In addition to having jurisdiction to conduct hearings, the board shall have the authority to, number 1, study animal-related issues, including but not limited to identifying ways to reduce animal overpopulation, encouraging animal adoptions, improve public relations, and improve animal safety and comfort, and make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners regarding those issues. Number 2, review and make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners regarding ordinances relating to the control and welfare of animals in Fulton County. Number 3, submit reports to the Board of Commissioners at the direction of the Board of Commissioners. 4, facilitate regular quarterly meetings between and among Fulton County citizens, animal advocacy groups, and organizations. 5, secure grant funding in cooperation with Fulton County Animal Control, animal advocacy groups, and government agencies. And 6, perform other duties as prescribed by the Board of Commissioners. Section 2 with the appointment, qualifications, and removal of members. Section A is the board shall consist of 7 members appointed by the Board of Commissioners. Each commissioner shall appoint 1 member to serve for 2 years. Thereafter, all members may be appointed for an additional term of 3 years and until their successors are appointed. B is no term of any member shall extend beyond the term of the district commissioner who appointed the member, but members shall serve until their successors are appointed. C, each board member shall reside in the geographic district of the appointing commissioner. D, each board member shall be required to attend a minimum of 3 board meetings per year. E, if for any reason the board has fewer than a full complement of 7 members, the chair or acting chair of the board shall notify the clerk to the commission of the Board of Commissioners. F, except as provided by law, all appointments serve at the pleasure of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners and may be terminated, rescinded, or removed from office without cause upon 4 affirmative votes by the members of the Board of Commissioners, upon such matter appearing on the board agenda after submittal by any member of the Board of Commissioners to the clerk of the commission. G, nothing shall prevent the Animal Welfare Hearing Board from making a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for the removal of one of its members from an appointment. Such recommendation may be made by the chair or acting chair of the Animal Welfare Hearing Board upon 4 affirmative votes by members of the Animal Welfare Hearing Board. H, any member of the Animal Welfare Hearing Board may resign from the organization upon submission of his or her intent in writing to the Animal Welfare Hearing Board. Next is section 3 with the board members and officers. Officers, the chair. Number 1, the chair of the Fulton County Animal Welfare Hearing Board shall be elected by all present members of the board during the first meeting of each calendar year and shall serve for the duration of that calendar year unless he or she resigns or is removed. The chair shall have the following responsibilities. The chair shall preside at all board meetings, appoint all committees and committee chairs, and be an ex officio member of each committee. In addition, the board chair will approve the agenda for each meeting and will transmit the agenda to the secretary to be distributed by the secretary to all members of the board and to the public. The chair is a voting member of the board. The chair is responsible for the orderly conduct of the board during the meeting and serves as the presiding officer. In order to ensure a fair, orderly, and efficient meeting, the chair must enforce the rules of procedure adopted by the board. Meetings are conducted in accordance with these procedural rules, applicable state law, and Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. Where a board member raises a procedural question and these rules are silent, and in the absence of a specific statute, ordinance, or resolution, the question shall be resolved in accordance with the provisions of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, provided the provision used to answer that question is not in violation of local, state, or federal laws. The vice chair, number 2, shall preside at board meetings in the absence of the chair. All other duties of the vice chair shall be assigned by the chair. Number 3, the secretary. The office of secretary may be held by the director of Fulton County's Emergency Management Agency or their designee. The secretary is an ex officio member of the board and will not be eligible to vote on board issues. The duties of the secretary shall be as follows. The secretary shall be responsible for providing public notice of all meetings as required by OCGA 50-14-1, Section D. The secretary shall be responsible for working with board chair to create an agenda of all matters expected to come before the board at any particular meeting pursuant to OCGA, I believe that's supposed to be Section 50-14-1E, excuse me. The secretary shall be responsible for obtaining and retaining verbatim transcript of each regular meeting of the board and, when feasible, any other meeting of the board. The secretary may use a court reporter, video recording, audio recording, or any other reliable means of retaining the contents of each recorded meeting. The secretary shall ensure that an accurate and complete transcription of each meeting is presented to the board for approval prior to the next meeting and then made available to the public after the next regular meeting, whether or not the minutes have been approved. The secretary's minutes of the meeting will be compliant with OCGA 50-14-1E2B and will include the names of the members present at the meeting, the names of the visitors present, a description of each motion or other proposal made, the identities of the persons making and seconding the motion or other proposal, and a record of all votes, including the names of each person voting for or against a proposal. However, if a motion is approved, members will be assumed to have voted in favor of the motion unless specifically identified as having voted against the proposal or abstaining. Minutes of executive sessions are also recorded and preserved but are not open to the public. Such minutes shall specify each issue discussed in executive session, and when matters subject to the attorney-client privilege are discussed, only the fact that the discussion occurred and its subject shall be identified, but the substance of the discussion shall not be recorded in the minutes. And that's pursuant to OCJ 50-14-1E2C. The secretary shall ensure that a summary of subjects acted on and the members present at any meeting of the board is prepared and made available to the public for inspection within 2 business days of the adjourning of such meeting in accordance with Code Section 50-14-1E2A. Then we have Section B, conflict of interest. A board member who knowingly has an interest that he or she has reason to believe may be affected by his or her official actions or the official acts or actions of the county shall abstain from participating in such official act or actions affected thereby. In addition to such abstention, the member shall state publicly The nature of such interest prior to any determination of the matter, the secretary shall record the reasons for abstention in the minutes of the meeting. Changes to the bylaws, Section 4. These bylaws shall be adopted by a majority of the board to govern the internal conduct of their affairs and shall not be inconsistent with the rules, regulations, and laws of Fulton County or the state of Georgia. Any amendment to these bylaws by a board member shall be submitted to the secretary in writing 1 week before the designated meeting. The proposed amendment shall be included on the agenda for that meeting and distributed to all board members. All amendments require majority approval by the present members of the board. The Section 5, Conduct of Meetings. A quorum. For the purposes of any meeting of the Animal Welfare Hearing Board, a quorum is required and shall consist of 4 or more members as appointed by the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. Any action or recommendation of the Animal Welfare Hearing Board requires the concurrence of a majority of the quorum. Part B, Decorum. All board members and meeting attendees are expected to conduct themselves in a courteous and respectful manner. A member or attendee shall not speak until recognized by the chair and likewise shall not interrupt another's remarks. All comments made shall directly address the motion or item being discussed. The chair shall enforce the rules of decorum, and if a member believes that a particular rule is being broken, he or she shall raise a point of order when recognized by the chair. With a second, the chair may either rule on the question or allow the board to decide the issue by majority vote. Any member shall have the right to express dissent from or protest against any action of the board and have the reason entered into the minutes. The vice chair shall assist the chair with retaining decorum during the meetings. The meeting schedule and details. Regular meetings of the board shall be held quarterly at a location to be determined prior to the meeting date. The date, place, and time of the regular meetings may be changed at any regular meeting by a majority vote of the board. A notice containing information prescribing the time, place, and date of the next regular meeting of the board shall be posted and maintained in a conspicuous place available to the public at the place of the next regular meeting, as well as on Fulton County's website at least 7 days in advance of the next regular meeting. The board shall also meet as required to review classification of dangerous and/or vicious dogs pursuant to Fulton County Code 34-282. During such meetings, members of the board who are present shall have the following powers: to hear charges as specified, by Fulton County Animal Control officers, to hear witnesses presented by the concerned parties. Each party shall have 15 minutes to establish the facts of the issue, present witnesses, or present documentary evidence. After the presentation of facts and witnesses, each party shall have 10 minutes to rebut any statements made or to refute evidence presented by the opposing party. And following the presentation of all facts, witnesses, and rebuttal evidence, the board members shall vote to affirm or reverse the Fulton County Animal Control Officer's declaration that the animal is dangerous and/or vicious. The board shall notify all parties in writing of the board's decision within 10 days after the hearing. The board is not entitled to modify the charge of a Fulton County Animal Control Officer beyond affirming or denying the charge brought, and is not in a position to modify or change the requirements placed upon the owner of a dangerous or vicious dog by the Fulton County Code. Annual reports. The board will prepare an annual report of all activities taken during a calendar year and provide the report to the Board of Commissioners. The report shall contain an in-depth review of the organization's activities, including goals, objectives, successes, problems, and/or the need for assistance by the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. The report shall be submitted to the clerk to the Fulton County Board of Commissioners on or before January 31st of each year. And then compliance with the Open Meetings Act. The board shall comply with all requirements of open meetings, which is OCGA 50-14-1. All board meetings shall be open to the public to the full extent required by law. All board decisions to the extent required by law are to be formally moved and adopted in an open meeting in order to be legally binding. And that concludes the bylaws.
Attorney Bowman, I think you were going to do the introductions as well, or we were going to have introductions. I had that on the agenda, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm sorry, clarification also, just the board member introductions?
Well, I'm just looking at the agenda. It says introduction, board members and participants before we got to the reading of the bylaws.
We can do so. I was waiting for our last member to join us.
Oh, that's it.
so
Gotcha. Okay.
Hopefully you didn't
Really?
get the
We're going to send an Uber for you at the next meeting. You're fine.
You're
No
here,
worries.
and that's the most important thing, because most people would say, I'm done with it, so thank you. Thank you for not giving up on us, and you're. So, yeah, I'm just gonna do a quick roll call, if you don't mind. So, Miss Webster,
Here.
Miss Wade,
Here.
Miss Factor,
Here.
Miss Colbert Bradford,
Here.
thank you, Miss Levy.
Yes, finally.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum, Mr. Bowman. I'll leave it to you as to how best to proceed.
With the quorum, I think would want to move to the next order of business, which would be the elections of the chair and the vice chair, which I think would be appropriate at this time if board members have any nominations they wanted to make for a vote for chair and vice chair. We could proceed with that.
Can I make a motion to nominate Isa for chair?
Moved and seconded, so unless there's any discussion, I think right for a vote.
You're the parliamentarian tonight, sir, so I'm going to be deferring to you.
All right, in that case, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, in that case, approved. And that there would then be a motion for a vice chair.
I'd like to make a motion for a vice chair for Calissa Wade. Second.
All right, it's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Then everyone in favor? And anybody opposed? Another unanimous.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, Chair and Vice Chair.
Ms. Webster, it is your meeting. We can progress through the agenda as written, or we could go in a different fashion. It is your call.
Oh, it starts now. We can continue on.
Immediately.
We can continue on with the agenda as listed.
Thank you. Attorney Bowman, thank you for everything. I'd like to go ahead and pause. We did read through the bylaws fairly quickly. I want to make sure that before we did lose our attorneys and counsel and other support staff or anything else that they could be pulled to, is there any questions for them? I think now is the appropriate time. If I may, Madam Chair, I know some questions were brought in the past about virtual meetings and such. I think there's been some one-off conversations. I want to be able to go ahead and offer the board the opportunity to ask the attorneys that in a public fashion and to be able to go ahead and understand some of the limitations that we do have, if that's okay with you, ma'am.
Yes, so one of the questions that I had raised, I guess outside of an official meeting, was in terms of virtual meetings for the public. I know that the board members have to attend meetings in person, so is there the opportunity to have virtual meetings so public can attend?
Yes, there is. And I think as mentioned earlier today that this meeting is streaming, so people should be able to access it. If they can't, or if it wasn't posted early enough for people to have advance notice of the streaming for this particular meeting, believe that will be done in the future for future meetings, and so public will have an opportunity to view online, very similar to what how the Board of Commissioners conducts their meetings, where they're in person. People are allowed to attend the meetings in person, but there's also an option to watch online.
And if I may follow up on that statement, it will prevent us, or not prevent us, it will provide some challenges, excuse me, is a better way to state that, a meeting location. So there's only certain places that we do have the technology. This is one of our newer conference rooms that we have, where we can actually go ahead and have multiple audio feeds and video feed and be able to do so. So we will have some limitations as where we can conduct meetings based upon that desire of the board.
Right, and I'll add, while it is certainly allowable and can happen and is very convenient for everybody, it is not a requirement to have virtual access. It's not a legal requirement of the Open Meetings Act, but it's something that I know a lot of boards do tend to do and like to do, and I assume the public appreciates as well. But it's not a legal requirement, but something that that we certainly can do. We are allowed to, but don't have to.
And then another question that I had, and as you also went through the bylaws, I think prior to this meeting, there was a discussion about the dangerous dog aspect was removed from the board, but I guess the bylaws still state that it's within this board, or can I get clarification on that?
Absolutely, great question. At this time, it does have it still stated within the bylaws. It is actually the desire of the chairman of the Board of Commissioners of Fulton County, as well as some of our commissioners, to be able to go relook at our overall ordinances whereas associated with this. And one of the things that we would like to do is move that aspect of that to the court system and remove it from this advisory board and change this format to be truly an advisory board in the process of ensuring that we're heading in the right direction, looking for ways that we can become better servants for the animal welfare in our community. So that's one of the things that we are working towards with the 7 elected officials that we have in Fulton County. So when that ultimately is voted upon, the bylaws will be updated to reflect so.
Okay.
Any other questions for our attorney?
I have 2 questions. For live streaming, are viewers going to be able to ask questions, or can they only watch?
At this time, I believe it's just going to be a live stream, so they'll be able to see. We do not have capability as it stands today to be able to pull questions in. In the future, we can look at opportunities to do that. So today is just going to be viewing only. As your attorney did advise in the past, this group has been more along the lines of someone who's interested, they will actually physically come to the meeting to be present as such. We're trying to get other places in the county able to go ahead and achieve board meetings and things along those lines. It takes a pretty significant staff to be able to go ahead and take some of that information in and be able to then read it. Most of those staff members do go home at the end of the day, so they're not within our purview of our department. So our team members can assist, and we can do what we can, and we'll continue to investigate other ways to be able to achieve that. But as it stands today, what we have tonight and maybe for the future would be sharing the information that's being discussed here, as opposed to physically being able to, taking questions in from a virtual platform.
Okay. And then my next question, do you have a timeline of when they're going to look at the bylaws?
What we're working is with Mr. Bowman and his team. We have about 3 months worth of work ahead of us to be able to look at. We're looking at other jurisdictions that have updated their ordinances and such. I know Ms. Gwynn has shared with us some of her successes as well in other jurisdictions, as well as some of the commissioners have solicited support of some folks from UGA. They're in the legal side of the house in the law school, and they've submitted some of the things that they thought would be interesting to go ahead and share with that. So what our desire is to pull that all together. And their attorney will go ahead and present that and let you all comment, to that end. If there's some concerns to that, we'd ask you to go and share that with your commissioner, or if there's other things that you think that should be included in the ordinance, to be able to do that as well. So really, you are the voice for your commissioner. At the same time, you're supposed to be feeding that information back to them so they can actually go ahead and direct us and my boss, Fulton, as to what would be the appropriate direction to go ahead and take these ordinances and such. So I believe the first thing we should do is make sure you all have a copy of what the current ordinance is, and that'll be the first action that we do tonight, make sure everyone has that. Be prepared. There's some things that are antiquated inside of it, so that's one of the things we wanted to be able to do, is bring it up to what we should be doing for the people that we serve currently. Long-winded answer, ma'am.
And then last question for me, this is more so for the public notice. What's the, I guess, legal requirement in terms of how long do we have to give the notice before the meeting actually happens? And is the notice just the notice that the meeting will occur, or does that also require an agenda?
So there's not a set, has to be X number of days. It doesn't have to be more than 14 days in advance for the posting of an agenda. But typically, you want to give at least a couple of days notice with an agenda also posted as well. But the goal is to have the meetings on a regular schedule, so that's a permanent posting out there. You'd want to give at least 48 hours notice if you are calling some kind of special meeting. Typically, I wouldn't imagine there are too many emergencies that would necessitate a snap meeting like that, but we want to give at least 48 hours notice to the public before any kind of special meetings, and typically try to have at least 48 to 72 hours before the meeting. You want to have an agenda out there for the public.
Any other questions for your attorney?
And as I said, if anything comes up either during the meeting or you think about it when you get home, you can either ask during the meeting, after the meeting, or send an email. We're happy to respond and help out.
Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to move on to Lifeline's presentation, and Ms. Gwynn will introduce herself and her team.
I think we had one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am.
That's okay. I do have one question. So what's the minimum number of meetings we can have as a board? I think we were shooting for quarterly, but
Yeah, the requirement set does say quarterly, so you would be looking at having at least 4 meetings a year.
yeah, okay.
All right, with that, we can move forward with the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Gwynn?
Does this work? Oh, it turns green too. Very high tech. My name's Rebecca Gwynn. I'm the CEO of Lifeline Animal Project. And just by brief introduction, Fulton County Animal Services as a whole is contracted to an outside contractor. This is not actually anything new. I've lived in Atlanta since the 80s, and it was contracted out at that time. I think it was contracted out since the construction of the current shelter, which has a 1978 date on it, and I'll probably refer to that 1978 shelter a few times. Lifeline has held the contract for Fulton County Animal Services since 2013, and we are at the end. We're actually in a 1-year extension of our second contract with Fulton County, and the next contract is up. It's up for rebid, so that process is underway. Along with me, I have the people that actually do the work. I just speak into the microphone most of the time. This is Audrey Shoemaker. She is the director of Fulton County Animal Services. And Audrey has been with Lifeline since, just about since the beginning, the inception of the contract, since 2013. 10 years she celebrates. Down the way, I know some of you are volunteers, and you probably know these people, but some of you may not. Down the way, we have Belinda Bell. Belinda is our Director of Operations at Fulton County Animal Services. Belinda's been with Lifeline, I think, about 8 years, perhaps, maybe, yeah. And Belinda has been in animal welfare for a really long time. She probably won't fess up to it, but it's a few decades. So, and we are very fortunate to have her as a part of our team and overseeing operations at Fulton County Animal Services. And next to her is Lauren Bluestone. Lauren is new to our team. She is our Director of Field Services in other. There seems to be that entity keeps changing names. We call it the Animal Control Officers, Field Officers, Animal Services Enforcement, all the above. And Lauren oversees that part of the operation, so it's the actual officers. Lauren is fairly new to the organization. I'm going to say 10 weeks, but I think that's generous, maybe 9 weeks. And she comes to us by way of a couple of different animal welfare organizations, but always in public service, and she's been in the field for 18 years or so. 20. Okay. Anyway, a long time. She started when she was 5. So that's who we are. A few of you are volunteers, and you may have had personal contact with me. I have never been quite sure how it's supposed to work with Lifeline's relationship specifically with this board, in part because the board has not met regularly since the inception of our first contract in 2013. So if you do contact us as board members, you will more than likely be referred back to the county. So we are essentially county employees, and it's not out of any sense that we don't wish to communicate, because we really do. I'm really looking forward to this being a very active and vibrant board. I mentioned to some of you, and I'm happy to do this, or I can send it through the county. We participated in the DeKalb County Advisory Board, and it meets monthly. It meets virtually, and you're all welcome to tune in to those meetings to just kind of get an idea of what it looks like in different counties. There are animal welfare hearing boards in a number of counties. The state law established this structure, and they don't have the same breadth of responsibility that this board has. Most of them only hear the dangerous dog appeals. And the state law is constructed is that the dangerous dog appeals are heard by the Animal Welfare Board, and if there's not one, then they're heard by the probate court. And for smaller counties, that may be great, but for the largest county in Georgia, that has proved to be kind of difficult to navigate. So I'm excited to hear that the commissioners want to change that and see what we can do. So, but there are boards across the state that have different kinds of functions. And with that, I'm going to give you a fairly quick overview of our statistics. We can make these available to you after the meeting. I'm not opposed to them being made available to you before the meeting, so it kind of depends on the format that you would like, and making that request through the county. And that's the slide. And see, this might be a little bit of an issue for me because I have to be able to see the screen and speak to you, but I'm going to try. So a lot of you are familiar, but please feel free to stop me if there's any term up on the screen that you don't understand and don't know what we're talking about, because I tend to just run through things really quickly as if you all know what animal services, how we talk amongst ourselves. But this is basically the number of animals that come into the shelter and how they come in. The total number of dogs, dog intake, OTC is over the counter, so that's people bringing dogs to the shelter for a variety of reasons. And the dogs come in the shelter in two ways, either over the counter or through our field officers. So we track both methods so we can figure out where we can best target our programs. We also carve out some of the reasons in these statistics as to why animals are coming in, what we call dog intake loss. These are referred to in the ordinance, I guess, as animals at large or stray animals. It's our belief that the lost animal, they actually have homes somewhere, and it's every indication that almost every animal that comes into our care does have someone attached to that owner. We may or may not, or to that animal. We just may not be able to locate them.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
What is the difference between dog intake lost, like a stray dog, versus over the counter, if over the counter is not owner surrender?
So the over the counter and field are how the animals come into the shelter, and lost and owner surrender are the reasons why. So so we want to distinguish. We want to know how many animals are coming in through our field officers. We want to know how many are coming in over the counter. We also want to know the type of animal that's coming in. So those don't all add up together. Over the counter and field should add up to the same number. Intake and lost will actually not add up because there are other reasons that animals might come in. So, but these are the ones that we report. And then the same is true for cats. In Fulton County, there is no ordinance that prohibits cats to be free roaming, and so, in fact, the current shelter was not built to house cats at all. We house them in our veterinary trailer. I think it's the veterinary trailer. Sometimes it's the break trailer, and sometimes it's the vet clinic trailer. So we also distinguish if cats are coming in over the counter or if they're coming in the field. And you see the intake over the field is quite low because there's no ordinance to enforce. for cats that are at large. So usually cats come in through our officers or cats who are injured. And then, our total intake. So, and we track these statistics, how it, year over year, and the far column is year to date. We want to see, what's growing, what's shrinking, where we can best target our efforts in terms of managing the intake. So, and these are just basically the raw intake numbers. They are up a little bit in June over last year, but they were up fairly significantly over May of this year. So we are seeing the trend going for our purpose the wrong direction. Next slide, please, sir.
Before we move on,
Oh,
for
I'm sorry.
no,
Okay.
that's okay. For the field intake number, are there certain requirements, maybe based on the month, that I guess are applied for residents calling in for animals to be picked up because it's a stray? So
The law doesn't change by season.
Okay.
So now the calls for service are prioritized by the county, and they are actually routed through the county's 911 system, and then they go. Then our field officers are dispatched through there. So and then there are, for example, if there's a call with an injured animal, and then there's a call about just I saw a dog on the street. So the injured animal is going to have, I believe it's a 45-minute response time. That's a priority one call. There's a 24-hour response time for just an animal at large.
So, as I guess more of a scenario where our shelters are on any given day can be at a certain capacity, right? Where it's hard to bring in more animals.
Yes.
In the scenario where the animal is not injured or does not pose a threat, is that animal still attempted to be picked up in the field?
Yes. If yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I've heard people say, though, that they have found stray dogs and are encouraged not to go through the shelter process. I understand there's a friendly finder.
All right. There's a couple of different programs that
But
we
I've
have
been
in
told
place.
people have been turned away, said, we can't help you.
So as all of you, or most of you know, if you haven't had a chance to visit the current shelter, I don't know that I necessarily recommend it. However, it might be a good thing to do. So there were a couple of instances last year where we went into an emergency only intake situation, and at one point it was required by the Department of Agriculture, but we have worked with them to to do the best we can. We've also, many of you are familiar with our Midtown location, so that is something that Lifeline has provided for Fulton County through donations and philanthropic support. So the county doesn't actually support the Midtown location, but we use that as an overflow location for Fulton, and that is because the shelter is beyond its lifespan.
We also added some capacity at your spay-neuter clinic
Correct,
in College
correct,
Park as
yes.
well. So
The county did invest some in our College Park clinic, and we do run a good bit of our spay-neuter through that clinic for the shelter. And we've used it in emergency. Some of you may know that we had a canine flu outbreak at the end of 2022 in December. We immediately were able to reroute animals to the College Park clinic thanks to the county, and as that facility began to fill, that's when we leased the Midtown facility.
Where's the Midtown?
It's at 981 Howell Mill. It's the building formerly known as the Atlanta Humane Society. Yeah, they sold that building a few years ago, and they have been leasing it back. And they moved in December, and we leased the dog area. It's a huge building, but we've leased about 20,000 square feet in that building. So we currently have, I think, 96 dogs there. We have 320 or so. Is that right? 323 in the old Fulton shelter. The shelter was built in 1978. It was designed to hold 80 dogs and no cats. So it puts us in a very difficult position. We were in emergency intake only procedures for the better part of last year, and some of that was just necessitated by a post-pandemic thing.
If you could use your microphone, please. Thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay.
A question about the surrenders. What is the number one reason why owners surrender their?
Audrey, you want to answer that?
Most is housing, people housing. A lot of people are, we do see people come up with U-Haul trucks, and some people have already been in-housed and are living with their pets and their vehicles, moving in with family. We hear pretty often that people's rent are increasing, and they've been given a 30-day notice. Increases over $100, or it's a short timeline to make an adjustment. But absolutely, housing is the number one reason.
And also, I think if you look at the density of the population, the more high-density housing you have, the less likely that they're going to either allow pets or allow what gets termed by insurance companies and landlords as aggressive breeds. And even though they're not aggressive or even that breed, but there's a stigma there. You'll see, though, in our intake numbers that, and we'll talk a little bit more through the statistics about our programs for people who feel like they do have to give up their pet. But you'll see in our intake numbers, so it's less than 10% for dogs is owner surrender. So. And that varies, but it's rarely more than 15%. So the vast majority of our intake are dogs at large now. People can bring dogs at large, or stray dogs, or lost dogs to the shelter that may or may not be their own pet, but they, the information we're given is that they found the dog or cat. And then our outcome statistics. This is all the ways that animals can leave the shelter. We're looking at our adoption numbers. We're very excited that our Fulton County adoption numbers are starting to trend upward a little bit. That's very good news. Not so much on cats, but that is also a function of not having a whole lot of cats. We transfer, because the current shelter was not built to house cats at all. And it's really not conducive to people being able to see the cats. We transfer most of those cats to Lifeline's Community Animal Center for adoption, which has a very nice cat area. The new shelter has catios, and it's going to be awesome. So cats are going to be a part of everyone's life in Fulton. RTH is what we call return to home. It used to be in the field. It's called return to owner. But we really want to emphasize that pets are in homes with families, and so we have our return to home. We are ecstatic that return to home number is starting to climb up, and we're really pretty far below the national average in terms of return to home. I think it's usually it's around maybe 12%. The national average is closer to like 20%, and we're lucky to get 10% return to home. So we're excited to see that number going up. Transfers to rescues. So we have that in two categories. There's the one transfer to rescues so it's not included in our own internal programs. So we are, and in this case, these don't include the dogs transferred to Midtown. Those are staying within the Fulton County shelter system. But we do transfer mostly cats from Fulton to our community animal center, and so that you have the two different numbers. So we're good to see, while that number is not climbing, it's not declining, so we are seeing more animals transferred to rescue. It's still pretty far below what it used to be back in the day, pre-pandemic. About 30 to 35% of our animals would go out to rescue groups. But the rescue groups are just not that robust. And adoptions have trended downward for the last 2 years, not only for us, but for the whole country. So rescue groups are also full as well. And I say this mostly, it's mostly dogs. Cats fly out of our community animal center, and there doesn't seem to be an adoption issue across the nation with cats. But for medium to large sized dogs, which is the majority of our population, we're seeing a lot of them not adopted, and I think that is can be correlated to the housing issues as well. We do have a trap neuter return program in Fulton. That is where cats that are brought in by the public that are outdoor cats and have outdoor environments that they live in, we will provide free spay neuter and vaccination, and those cats are returned to where they came from. For us, sadly, our euthanasia numbers are creeping up. They've been up for May and June, and Audrey may talk a little bit more about that. It's somewhat a function of space. We had our save rates, which is the number of animals, the proportion of animals who leave alive for the number that you take in. We've had that number above 90% for a few years. We have fallen below that 90% threshold. It is generally recognized that 90 or above is a no-kill shelter. However, that's really sort of an arbitrary number. So what we look at is, are we ending the lives of animals who might have had options in the past or might have options in the future if we have more space? And we are in a situation where we feel like we are doing that now. And that it is very much a function of space, and our adoption rates, while they're up right now, they're actually further down than they were a few years ago between that and the transfers. So that you can go to the next slide unless you'll have other questions about outcomes. Okay. Our foster program, we have a goal of trying to get 50% of the animals into foster. We have achieved that a few times. It's a lot harder on dogs, in part because our dogs are kind of big. We do get most of our cats into foster rather rapidly. And most of the cats that come into the shelter are like neonatal kittens. Like, they need to go to foster homes right away. So our team does a great job with that, and we are seeing our foster home numbers increase. And you can go to the next slide. These are field operations. So when someone calls for animal service, or they're calling animal control, we call that a first sequence call. So we handle roughly, those numbers are going up. You can see it's gone up 30% over last year. So we are seeing an increase in the demand for the service. We also keep track if it may take an officer more than one time to handle a call, and if they have to return, that's a follow-up call. There are most cases we're able to resolve without issuing a warning or a citation, but when those are merited, we do issue them. And
excuse me, Rebecca?
yes.
For the calls, are they counted for calls that hit dispatch? So like if they go through 911 and hits dispatch, that's considered a call? Or-
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And when you call animal services, you get a press 1 for the adoptions, press 2 for the. So if you press 2, I think it's 2 for field services, or if you have an injured animal or anything like that, it goes to the 911 system. So, and currently and the county manages the 911 system, and they dispatch to our officers.
Rebecca, if I may, just to clarify, so if someone does the 10-digit dial, Rebecca stated, it will go, when they push that number 2, to the Fulton County PSAP, Public Safety Answering Point. Dispatchers there have protocols. They will go ahead and ask the appropriate questions and such to triage the call based upon the information that Lifeline has presented through that triage process. He'll then put the call into a certain category for response, and then it will be passed to the dispatch side of the house, where a dedicated dispatcher will work with the Fulton County Field Services individuals and dispatch that call based upon the priority. If it's a lower priority call, that call will be held. A higher priority call, of course, will go out sooner than that. The officer clears, the next high priority call will be given to that officer for handling. So there's always going to be that. If it's a lower priority, it keeps going to get pumped down. And there are classifications of calls. We can share that with the group. It's in the current contract that we have with Lifeline. There's 3 major classifications: a 45-minute response for 3 categories, a 4-hour response for a couple, and then it goes into that 12 to 24-hour response for some other ones. So if you are in those other periods of time, it could be an extended time before that call is answered, but the higher priority calls are handled within the time limits that have been set forth by the contract.
And what was the number again that we said for the number of, what are they called, animal service officers? I don't know what they're called now.
We call them animal service officers. We are supposed to have 15. I believe we have 10 right now, or we've had some changes in that department. 11, right. And so we have 4 openings for animal control officers, or field services officers, animal services officers. Just correct me when I say it wrong.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What are the types of citations being issued?
Anywhere from, if we can identify an owner, we might issue a citation for a dog at large. There's an anti-tethering ordinance. There could be citations for inadequate shelter or failure to get veterinary care, those kinds of things. Probably the tethering is one of the more used citations, and then there's ordinance violations for cruelty, neglect and cruelty. And then those, if it's a more egregious circumstance, it'll usually be a state charge, and other law enforcement will also get involved with that. So, Lauren, I don't know if you want to, or you don't have a mic.
She does.
Oh, she does. Do you want to add? No. Okay. They don't really. Audrey likes to speak. She'd like me to let her talk, but we'll give her that opportunity. So this just kind of gives you an idea of the amount of. It's a pretty high service level. Our first sequence calls are probably double that of DeKalb's. So, and the population is not double. So it's a pretty robust team and service. A number we're really proud of is the field return to homes. So that's when an officer does pick up an animal at large and does a little extra legwork and is able to locate that animal's home on the scene and return the animal right then and there. The officers are equipped with microchip scanners and that kind of thing as well. So we're really excited to see that number jump. I know 23 doesn't sound like much, but it has been below 10 for a long time. So, and I do have to attribute that to Lauren and her work with her team. The next slide. Our community support. So during the pandemic, everything changed, and people couldn't come into the building. Our officers were on emergency protocols. We had to find some new ways of working, and one of those ways was how can we provide support to the community in a different way, and from that evolved our community support teams, and now they've become a much more robust part of our organization. So when someone does call in and needs some sort of help with their pet, or really just anything, I mean, we work to provide veterinary care, supplies. You'll see it says supply at 145. I think there's somewhere on another side there's something about food, I think, as well. But so our officers are providing support in the field, and they're working in conjunction with our community support teams at the shelter to try to help people and pets stay together. And I think that's one of the reasons why our owner surrender numbers are a little bit less, although we also help people rehome their pets. And a lot of this was, designed to try to minimize the burden on the shelter. But I've likened it somewhat to something that Matt's really familiar with that's called integrated mobile health care. And it was a system that was developed that when everybody would end up in the emergency room, like you'd call for an ambulance, and the instant response was to go to the emergency room no matter what was going on. and emergency rooms became inundated. And so they looked at different ways to triage calls. Sometimes people actually just needed a doctor's appointment, 2 days away or something, and how can they facilitate that? And we're sort of taking the same approach. Not every animal has to come into the shelter. And the more we can build out programs that help animals in the community and partner with community members to help animals in the community, the less burden it is on the shelter. So while this is located inside the shelter, it's very much integrated with our field services effort and also some of Lifeline's private programs. So we have our community animal center veterinary care that we'll refer people to. We also sometimes see community animals within the shelter. The new shelter is going to really let us explode on this, particularly because of the clinic facilities that are being built into the new shelter. So really, I think we'll be able to expand this quite a bit.
Is
Audrey-
the Pets for Life program, is that one of the private Lifeline programs?
Pets for Life is a private program that we also, our officers work with our Pets for Life team. So that's a program that Lifeline maintains completely through philanthropic support. And I do give you statistics on that because it is very integral to our service offering in Fulton County. It is actually, but it's not part of Fulton County services. But those teams work together, they train together, they refer back and forth. Hopefully most of the referrals are going to Pets for Life, but sometimes Pets for Life has to refer something to animal services as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that maybe in the next slide, or as we just have click volunteer program, just gives you an idea of the number of people helping in the shelter. Many of you are counted in these hours, and we are excited to see those numbers going up as well. The number of volunteer hours actually in June doubled, so we're really, really excited to have a lot more people coming in and helping. And the next slide is Pets for Life, I think. And this just gives you an idea. So Pets for Life is a private program that Lifeline operates. It's in 6 zip codes within Fulton County, primarily in southwest Atlanta, a little bit of northwest Atlanta, but primarily southwest Atlanta. And this is a program where all services that we provide to anyone that lives in those zip codes for their pets, all the services are free. So we see up to about 4,000 pets a year, and it looks like we're on track actually to see closer to, I guess, 6,000, 6,500 this year. It's free spay neuter. We do veterinary visits, supplies. We've had to we used to not do food. We've had to up that. And the only reason the food numbers are a little lower this year than last year is because we've run out of food supply. A lot of that food is donated. So it's how much philanthropic support we can generate to support the program. So we've had some very generous donors covered, like the veterinary care and spay neuter. But the food is kind of new with the pandemic, but the community is really struggling. The economy is tough on everyone. And so these are folks that are community is some in some cases working poor and some just below the poverty line. So
I have a question,
doing what we
please.
can. Mhm.
Is there any particular criteria to be able to get some of the services, spay neuter at no charge, things like that?
You have to learn the zip code.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Are those zip codes listed online?
They are. Yeah, they're listed. I believe you can get to it through the Fulton Animal Services website, and you can certainly get to it through Lifeline's website. And it's part of 30318, 30310, 30314. It's that. If you're looking at a map of Atlanta, there's a section basically from a little bit north of I-20 almost down to the Lakewood area, starting at maybe 75, 85 and going to 285. There are hardly any grocery stores even in that area, much less any kind of pet supply stores or something. It's a resource desert. And so we've picked those areas because of the lack of resources, and we still believe that pets are ending up in the shelter often because not because of a lack of responsibility, but because of a lack of resources. So we have teams in these neighborhoods. We have actually 5 employees that literally go door to door, offering assistance if they see any sign that there's a pet in that household. And we're, I believe 3 of those employees actually live in those communities and have been there for decades. And we have a combined animal welfare experience of about 45 years in our Pets for Life team. So it's a very robust program. I think that may be our last slide.
Rebecca, could you also touch upon the work that's been done with the Meals on Wheels program?
Well, I would, except it really didn't get off the ground very well. So we had a partnership. We were working on a partnership with Meals on Wheels, so that because many of their clients also live in that neighborhood, so their clients are all eligible for Pets for Life services, and so we were partnering with them to make sure that their clients at least know about the program and had access. They've had some difficulty, so we're working with those clients, but they had difficulty integrating Pets for Life into their program. So sorry about that.
No, I think it was something we were really excited to be able to go ahead and
It was
do.
a cool
and
thing, yeah.
That's one of the things I'll look at the advisory
Yeah.
board. If you have ways to help us with that, I think what you're hearing from Rebecca and the team is that there's opportunities for us to go ahead and help the people that are most in need, and people
Yeah.
that are in the Meals on Wheels program are in significant need. So we're always looking for ways to be able to go ahead and help that community.
And we are always looking for human services organizations and agencies that we can partner with, because we're looking to preserve a family unit, right? We believe, and all of you believe, that pets are part of your family. And how do we support that? And there's not a lot of support. People kind of look at it. There's animal issues and there's people issues, and they don't cross over. But actually, in real life, they're very much intertwined. And the more that we can, the reason animals end up in the shelter is not because of the animals, it's because there's a human problem. So the more we can partner with agencies that are working on those human problems and provide services for pets, the lesser the burden is really economically on the county to basically have a shelter for homeless animals. So we're always looking for partnerships, and if you have those kind of connections, please refer them to Audrey. We have a social worker in our community support team, and I believe we have a social worker coming on board in our field services team as well, right? Yeah. That's the stats. Next time I do it, it'll be a lot faster, I think. But, and we will send those to you. And with that, I want to turn it over to Audrey and her team. Please, yes.
For Pets for Life,
Mhm.
would it be possible and appropriate to expand services for people who are maybe not in that zip code but are part of the county and fall under low income? Is there an opportunity we could look at?
So we do have some services available. If someone's got a pet in trouble, we'll do anything we can through Fulton County Animal Services to assist them. So we are providing services outside of the Pets for Life zip codes as best we can. Unfortunately, it's often a matter of people asking for help. Like sometimes they're not willing or able to ask, or there's this kind of law enforcement punitive thing around animal services. We've just instituted a new program that we call Home Free, that really gives people amnesty. If we pick up your pet and it's their first time there, you can come reclaim it with no fees. And so I think the new shelter will give us a lot more opportunity. The Fulton County Animal Services is kind of a scary place to go. So, and the new shelter, they're doing art installations. It's crazy. You're just not going to believe it. It's crazy. What's going on? So,
What I wanted to mention too that, thank you. I wanted to mention too that for field services, we really have a vision of making the officers more welcoming and serving the community and working with them rather than being so punitive. A lot of the folks that we serve through our PFL program, It's door-to-door model by design because transportation can be difficult and you want to try to reach them at home. So we do very much look at our field officers as having that opportunity to hopefully work with people to get them into compliance. We've been working more and more on that. That's a huge opportunity and very much in line with Lauren's vision for that department. So our community support team works with them a lot, although our community support team has not been able to be very mobile. So we do use our officers to work with folks in different zip codes. So I do want to point that out. I don't think there's always such a difference between what PFL can do, what our community support team can do at the shelter, and what our officers can do. We very much work together as often as we can.
Yeah, I think the only difference is that the idea behind PFL is to be proactive, and we're having to do some pretty serious work to be able to transform animal services from being complaint driven to being community driven. But that's part of our vision for animal services, is that it's more of a proactive program and less just responding to calls, right? So it's working more with people in the community who are identifying issues with animals, and working with the community to solve those issues. That hopefully, again, going back to the emergency room, not every animal needs to come to the shelter. Not every person needs to go to the hospital. So, what solutions can we find within the communities? And that's something that we would really look to all of you, because you are a part of your communities, to help us navigate that and make that a really robust service offering.
So I do have a question about when you mentioned a partnership with Meals on Wheels. What was that partnership supposed to look like with Meals on Wheels?
So it was designed, so we had some grant funding to be able to provide free services to Meals on Wheels pets of Meals on Wheels clients. So what we wanted to do was to get their volunteers who are in people's homes every day to help identify people who could benefit from the service and to make that introduction. So it was a fairly simple concept. It was just something they felt administratively was going to be difficult for them. So, and if you have any connection with them, I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
No, not with Meals on Wheels.
Yeah.
But I mean, listening to your concept, I think it's a fairly simple concept.
It really
and it's
is.
something that can be proactive to kind of help families. It is a proactive way that we can help families so that we won't. Okay, we could definitely talk.
Yeah. There's a new program, it would be new to us. It's in a couple of different cities called Align Care, and it's essentially for people who have some means but not a lot. Align Care, ALIGN Care. And it's another program that's really trying to support families, and it's working with different community partners to establish a veterinary care fund. And so it works almost like insurance for people. They apply. It's a program that does have a means testing. We don't have means testing for any of the things that we're offering. This is a program that does have means testing. And for people who qualify, they would get all veterinary care 20% of the cost. So, and that's something we're exploring as well. But we have a lot of ideas and things we want to do.
So speaking of vet care, it wasn't covered here, but I'm curious to kind of talk through, and I know based on agenda, there's only 1 minute left. But for vet resources, or I guess how the animals within the shelter kind of, how do I rephrase this? So we know there was a flu outbreak probably twice, right, I believe?
Yes.
With that happening, and then with the standard things that, you guys take care of, spay, neuter, up to date on vaccines, things of that nature, how many vet resources, like vet techs, vets, do we have allocated in the county shelter? I guess, I don't know if that's a contract thing or, and I guess how much funding goes towards these, vet things?
So the contract allocates, it's 1.5 veterinarians. And so we have one full-time veterinarian, and then we fill in with relief vets. The new contract will hopefully have more. The new clinic is much larger. And this is an awkward time because we can't really discuss the new contract because it doesn't exist. And so once the county makes some decisions in that way, then we can talk more, Lifeline can talk more about the future. The county can talk about anything. But and I think we have 5 veterinary technicians, and that I can speak to a request for a proposal went out, and so those numbers were upped in what the county's minimum requirement would be. And we would like to have a more robust team.
If I may, Rebecca, to jump in, so to save you, throw a lifeline. We are in the middle of an RFP process. That's what she's trying to avoid having too many discussions associated with that because her bid, as well as others, were submitted. It is now in the purchasing's office. A committee has been selected to go ahead of county employees to be able to review those, make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners to be able to go and vote on who that contractor would be going forward. So that is the process that we're in right now, and we can't go into grave detail. We can share with what we put out as the RFP request. As Ms. Gwynn stated, we did up some of the numbers that we felt that we needed to do. Joe did an incredible job of looking at 10 benchmark counties. So the county holds itself against 10 benchmark counties across the country, some of them being Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Travis County, Texas, Orange County, Florida, places like that. And what we wanted to do is make sure that we were doing what was right based upon what they're looking at for the communities that they serve and such. So we were really surprised when we looked at some of our numbers that we were spending about 40% less. And I say we, it's collectively, because the cities pay into this program. If you're not aware of that, next meeting I'll be more than happy to do a deep dive into how the finances work for this whole thing for you all. But the cities work with the county. The cities pay their fair share of what the total program costs are. So we're about 40% less than what our benchmark counties do in other parts of the country, and we're 30% less than what metro Atlantic counties are doing for services in this regard. So this is where we look at you as being advocates. If this is something that's near and dear to your constituents' hearts, 66% of households in Fulton County have an animal. Majority of our residents that we serve have an animal in some form or fashion. So the 7 elected officials that you all serve for, we would hope that you would advocate for that in the process. My boss, Chief Operating Officer Adams, we take direction from our BOC. So if there's things that are near and dear to the hearts of the people you all represent in the community, please share that with them. It allows us to be able to have a clearer direction as where we need to take the program.
I have a question. Do you guys know a percentage or how many dogs might be brought back after adoption, and what type of information or services can you offer people to kind of set them up for success? And I don't know if there's any legal risk of giving behavior advice or training advice or things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I actually don't. Do you know our current return number?
Our return rate's pretty low. It's
like 8%?
Yeah, it's like 6 or 8%. It's not high. There was kind of talk about everybody was taking their adopted pandemic animals back. That wasn't our experience. I don't think it actually was anyone's experience. And we do have post-adoption resources. We have training. We give training. I have training available at our community animal center for adopters and fosters, and we'll be able to do a lot more of that with the new shelter because it will have room to accommodate that. So we have quite a few resources. We have a what do you call it? It's basically text a trainer kind of thing. So we have that available. We will assist people if they do need additional veterinary care or something like that. We'll do everything we can to try and keep an adoptive family together as well.
Hey, Audrey, does that number include people that take a dog and bring it back within like the first 2 weeks if they're considering that trial period?
It does, yeah.
It does? It's really only 8%?
Yeah. On the high end. I mean, it depends if it's I'm sorry, this is not, if it's on it depends on how they hit the program wise. So if they're in like a trial adoption and they're still, if they'd return within 2 weeks and they're under foster, then it would not hit that number. So, so as long as it's
So
an
is that
adoption.
why I feel like as a volunteer, I see a lot of returns, but they're not.
If I could just, if you could turn your microphone on, ma'am, thank you so much.
So is that why, as a volunteer, I see a lot of returns, but they're just not pinging that statistic because
It
it
very
technically
likely is going through. We do offer, for those who are not as familiar with some of our programs, we do really try to be as low barrier as possible with getting pets out. Obviously, everything about sheltering is trying to move them through the system as fast as possible. So we offer Dog for a Day, Weekend Warrior, our regular foster, where fosters would assist us until they're able to help find an adoptive home. We do trial adoptions. I call them trial adoptions. You may also hear them be referred to as foster to family or foster to adopt. And that is when someone who's coming in, they're not really sure if they're ready to commit. Foster feels a little bit easier for them to manage at the time. And so they complete a foster agreement where we ask that they make the decision within 2 weeks. We do extensions as requested if needed, but we do ultimately end up asking them to make a decision. So I think that's probably where it feels our foster to family trial adoption numbers have increased over the last few years. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that. I just was thinking that number just seems so much higher in my head, just from the dogs that I walk and I see them go out and I see them come back in. And
It has been interesting too, since we have been operating our Midtown location, with that being a newer location, being formerly the Humane Society. There's a lot of apartments in the area, and I think you don't see the I could speculate all sorts of reasons, but it's not as crowded as our Fulton County location. We have seen higher return rates at that location, which is starting to stabilize a little bit.
really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And Matt, just a quick question for you. The RFP process, is that something that the board has visibility to? Or,
There are some things that we can share. There's other things that we have to follow by the procurement rules of the county and such. And I'm not sure if Attorney Bowman is well-versed in those procurement laws, and he may be another section of the attorney team up there. But I know that when it comes to this process, myself, Alton, Joe, David, as it happened last time, we have to sign affidavits and such that we have no conflict of interest, and we go through the process. It is open in some form or fashion. All notes from the evaluation process are made available thereafter, things along those lines. So we still have to adhere to all the rules associated with that, but there are some things that we just can't talk about in an open setting because we have one of the people that did submit an application, an RFP, excuse me, or proposal.
Yeah, and I don't have, I'm not an expert on the county-specific rules on the procurement process, but generally, what Mr. Kelmar is saying is correct, where that process is pretty close to public view while it's going on, while the evaluation process in particular is going on, but afterwards, then all that information is available to the public.
And it's just awkward. I mean, there's a no contact rule, right? But we have to have contact. We work together. So, we have to be very, very mindful, but also pretty strict about what we'll talk about. And so, we won't talk about it.
It's like Bruno. We're not going to talk about Bruno.
Oh no. Okay. We're
Open.
I don't know
Madam
how
Chair,
much
any
of
other
a-
questions for Lifeline?
no, I don't have any more questions. If there's no other questions, then we can move to the next item.
Well, the next thing is also Lifeline. We're going to just let Audrey kind of update you on some of the things that we're doing, and things are happening right this minute as we speak.
Well, I'll be really brief so that we have more time for questions, but just to give a quick rundown of our numbers, which Rebecca gave some. Today, we have 323 dogs at Fulton, or at least we did earlier today. We have 96 at Midtown. Midtown has a capacity of 100 dogs. We don't have any cats there. So we are constantly moving different dogs from our Fulton facility to our Midtown facility, depending on what the needs are. Sometimes it may be new intakes if we're experiencing during times like the flu, where we want to avoid having animal, we'll completely divert intakes to Midtown. And we usually stay between the 80 and 100 dogs at Midtown because we need that space desperately. We have 15 cats at the shelter, 1 guinea pig, 1 rabbit, 1 goat that just came in today, and a donkey just left before we were coming to this meeting. Yes. Good news for the donkey. We have converted our database that we have used. Fulton County Animal Services has used a database called Chameleon for as long as I think they've ever used a system to manage their animal population and licensing. We've moved to PetPoint, and that happened on July 19th. That has been not a flawless process, as anybody would expect for that much data to be converted. And Animal Services is a very complex operation, so that includes our field operations. Obviously, the same system is in place with dispatch, but that ultimately ends up hitting our now PetPoint system. So that has been a challenge for our team to overcome because there's a lot of work to be done on a day-to-day basis while they're learning a new system, and we've been fleshing out some of the challenges that we had with the conversion itself, but working with the PetPoint team to make corrections wherever possible. We for that reason, we did actually report on our June numbers because the July numbers were not as readily available. And June was a really tough month for us. If many of you are volunteers, so you've seen us over the years, summers are really pretty brutal in shelters, animal shelters, for a lot of different reasons. In the last couple of years, actually I guess almost 4 years now, have been really difficult with the pandemic and trying to navigate our new reality. But we had the second flu season for us in May. And the second time the flu hit, it was very challenging. So June, we were still struggling with quarantining dogs. And if you're familiar with the shelter, how many of you most of you have been to the shelter? Karen, okay. Well, just to sort of describe it, and unfortunately we're moving. I'm a little jealous of Matt right now having to talk about our current shelter when he gets to talk about the new one. But a lot of the tough decisions in our euthanasia increase is really attributed to the space that they have to be housed, and the fact that the system, they're not flowing through the system as quickly as we would like for them to. Our adoption numbers are down. We've made some adjustments, which I will very briefly touch on. But we have shoreline cages that face line every single wall, and it's essentially a large warehouse where all of our dogs are. So there's 33 dogs that are kept in another building, and those are our court hold dogs or dogs that are not safe for the public. And then every other dog that is at Fulton County Animal Services is essentially in one large room. And most of the housing that was built in 1978 was built for group housing. So a lot of our dogs, they're larger runs, but that does mean that we have anywhere between 2 to 6 dogs in a run together. And as you can imagine, if you have pets, that can be very challenging housing. So we have shoreline that faces every single, those are the cages. So you have certain space requirements, and dogs don't like isolation. Shelters are not very easy. So after having our flu and just the housing in general, this summer has been pretty challenging for us. Fortunately, our euthanasia numbers have stabilized a little more, and they've decreased from where they were in June. I don't have those actual numbers in front of me. I apologize. But I think we're headed in the right direction with that. I'm hoping that our adoptions will continue to increase. We also made some adjustments to our behavior and foster program to try to make it a little more geared towards moving animals through the system. We call it our Pathways Department. I think many of you are familiar with that. It's where our current pathways team works very closely with our animal care team to look at the dogs that are struggling the most and try to identify pathways for them out, primarily through our foster program. And it includes a daily, we call them focus groups, and daily rounds where they do them together as teams. And then the afternoon, we do a focus group where those dogs that have been identified as struggling the most are pulled out, and as a group, they evaluate them and try to come up with some sort of plan. Concludes videoing. You guys have probably all been a part of that, and you're welcome to join the afternoon focus groups. They happen at 3 o'clock. So we are trying to get us to the new building. I think I'm going to sort of stop there and leave some room for questions.
Madam Chair.
Other than medical reasons, what are you seeing the most of in terms of choosing animals that need to be euthanized? I know that's a tough subject.
No, and I appreciate it. We actually, fortunately, we work with a lot of rescue partners, and so if an animal is not suffering, and we believe they can be saved with medical intervention that may exceed what we're able to do at the shelter, we do work with rescue partners for those. So our medical euthanasia is actually is not as high as our behavior euthanasia. Most of the dogs that are euthanized are larger dogs that are deteriorating behaviorally or come in and are not safe for placement. Primarily, most of them would not be dogs that we'd be comfortable putting in the community. In June, we did struggle more with dogs that were deteriorating at the shelter, and that was a challenging increase for us. With the flu, there was even more isolation than just the fact that they're shelter dogs, because we weren't able, many people weren't able to take them into their homes at risk of getting their own pet sick, although we were not, we didn't have a stop outcome, but it was obviously more challenging to place them. So that sort of led to more euthanasia of dogs that had just deteriorated while they were in our care.
Any more questions for Audrey? All right, we can go to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Adams, would you like to say anything before I get started?
No, I think the one thing I would say, and we heard reference to it, that the current facility, when we were describing it, and, well, we were describing the need for a new facility, we described the old one as grim. That's the word I used. And it really is, if you like animals, it's a tough place to visit. And so we can't open this shelter fast enough, and we really are excited. And we are looking forward to you being involved as much as you like. You did ask a question about programs, and I think that the fact is that as much as we'd like to do more stuff, our current facility doesn't allow that. It doesn't allow us to welcome the public in for any type of instruction. It doesn't allow us to run kids programs. And so our expectation is that with this new facility, people are going to want to come and hang out. They're going to want to hang out in a catio or whatever it's called, right? But it really is going to be a cool place, and we have the space allocated that will allow us to do more and more community things. So that's one of the benefits, I think, of moving into the new facility as well. But with that, I will let Matt take it away.
Thank you, sir. Like we said, this is probably the happiest topic to go ahead and talk about for quite some time, and we are so eagerly looking forward to this. I started my role with Animal Services in 2017. When I met the team, I think Calissa was advocating at that time for a new shelter, as well as some others. And to Alton's point, it was a horror show at times for folks. The team had to work in conditions that were substandard, and that's a very G-rated way of stating that. I remember sitting in the director's office and having a rat run across my shoe that was bigger than my foot. I remembered meeting people on the team where they would open a drawer and they had a rat with babies, and they just went ahead and decided that drawer is going to be for the rat to go ahead and reside in. They'll work out the rest of the desk. So it is not something that we wanted to be able to go ahead and continue with. At the same time, we went ahead and did some changes with the facility. We hardened the structure to make sure that we can remove the rodents. We fixed a lot of the things that were there. We went ahead, if anyone that is familiar with the site, we put Connex containers. We poured concrete to remove any ways from rats can burrow in to be able to get food and things along those lines. We increased our abatement program tenfold to be able to control that population, which is difficult to do when you reside right next to a train track. When the sun sets, the rats come over the top of the train track to go ahead and look for anything they could possibly scavenge. So it's a challenge where we're currently located. And we've also did some other things along the way with moving field operations down the street into a trailer to try to make more space in the shelter for the operations that's there. There's only so much you can do with the property. So it got to the point that the 7 elected officials went ahead and said, yes, you guys can start the process. And one of the things that Alton has always taught me is you don't go down this voyage without making sure you do a needs assessment. We can share that with you all. A very significant needs assessment was done. It went all the way from the top of Fulton to the bottom. We heard from our constituents. We heard from what the needs are in the community. And a design was built based upon that, based upon how big of a facility we needed, not only for currently, but the years ahead. We're looking at a 40-year shelter that we're actually building right now, and how can we handle those particular needs, as well as what's the location. And I think you heard Pets for Life today, one of the programs that Lifeline runs, is there's a desert. And it just so happened that one of those deserts in need is where we had property. And it worked out well for everyone in that regard, is that we had some property that we could build a shelter. It's a part of our community that's centrally located from the north and south. We do not have the capability to go ahead and build satellite facilities and such, so we had to look for one location that could fit the needs of the most amount of the individuals and make the greatest impact in our community. And I think that's where we have it. So what we're about to show is where that location is, off of Fulton Industrial Boulevard, right across from the UPS facility, if you're familiar with that. It's just slightly north of I-20, and it's right outside of 285, so it's more on our western side of our jurisdiction, but once again, it's about as equal from north to south as you possibly can get within our footprint.
Matt, can I add just a couple of things?
Absolutely,
before you do?
sir.
One is the vote to move forward with this facility was unanimous. And that's not always the case in most votes, but there was unanimous support. And one of the keys to that was the involvement from folks like yourself. I remember talking to Commissioner Hausman, who was always a supporter, but I was, we're going through the process, and she was like, okay, I want to do it, and can you please stop having the advocates send emails because my mailbox is blowing up. Now, she was being a little facetious, but I say that to say that one of the reasons we were able to get the commissioners to embrace what we were trying to do was because we had folks like yourself calling and emailing them and showing up in I think it was red shirts when we did the vote, and I cannot overstate how important that is. And we're going to need your help moving forward, right? Because when we start putting the budget together for next year, the good news about a big facility, a new one, it's big and new. The bad news is that it's expensive to run a bigger, newer facility. And so we're going to come forward with a budget, and we're going to need your help as the board to kind of reinforce the importance of this facility to the community. So I think as Matt takes us through kind of the next few steps of what we need to do, your involvement, your support, your passion about this is going to be continue to be very important.
Thank you, sir. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure also that we level set with this is something that the 7 elected officials made a decision that they would build, and they wouldn't pass this cost on to the jurisdiction. So the debt service for this $40 million facility is being taken care of by the county. So the only cost distribution is how to actually operate it, like Alton said, and wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of that. What you see on the starting slide here is the artistic rendering, and it has finally come to a point when I show you some of the photos that the building is matching the artistic rendering, and that's one of those things that always makes you excited when you get to that level is what the vision of the artists and everyone else else, really actually achieving that. And we have been very blessed by having an incredible architectural firm, PGAL, who has actually designed animal shelters across the country, and Animal Arts, which is the premier supporter in this, and they're the experts when it comes to building animal shelters as well as veterinary clinics and things along those lines. So they have weighed in, and they're constantly wading in on a day-to-day basis. They actually have just done some of their site assessments and sent on their recommendations to Winter Johnson, which is a joint venture that's actually doing the construction work at the site, and beyond ecstatic with them and with the work they have done. It was a very long, arduous process for us to find a true contractor to go ahead and build this facility. And when we sat in this room, actually, and we were hearing all the different presentations, the one thing that struck myself, Alton was there and some others, Winter Johnson actually built 2 facilities at the Zoo Atlanta. And the level of detail that their folks were talking about, the things that they learned when they were doing the elephant enclosure, the giraffe area, what they showed was that they really believed in what they did and the animals that they were building the facility for. So that just was a tipping point for us, is that these folks really put their heart and soul into it. So what you'll see some artistic renderings there, as well as that what the overview of it is at the top right. And just dialing a little bit more into this is the overview of the property. And if I will turn away from you 1 second to drive my computer, if you don't mind, just to give everyone a reference of where things are. So up here in the corner is where the public would go ahead and enter the facility off of Fulton Industrial Boulevard. They would come into the parking lot over here. And the grand entrance that you saw, it's that big, huge wave of a ceiling, as a roof line, is where folks will welcome them into the facility. To Alton's point, this is the first time that we're going to be able to have a room that divides into 2 to be able to do community outreach. We're excited to be on all doubts about this, to be able to do first aid, CPR training for folks to learn how to care for animals. We're working with the Fulton County school system, so how can we get the student bodies inside here, field trips and such, so they can understand what it's like to live with animals and how can they train it better. You know, one of the things that I remember growing up is that seatbelts, we were learned about it in school. We went home to our parents and we just kept making them feel embarrassed that we don't do it as a family, and then everyone starts buckling up in their cars. So what we will hope to do is to get that next generation to go home, tell mom and dad we could be doing something a little bit better with the animals that are live with us on a day-to-day basis. So that's where the mouse pointer is right now, is our community outreach room. And then from there, we will move into this area over here, which is our dedicated cat area. One of the things that still sits with me as a frustration point is our cats are actually in a trailer in the back lot, right next to where our volunteers and our staff break. And they have no opportunity whatsoever to be able to go ahead and pull away from the animals, pull away from the public, and be able to re-energize themselves so that when they go back out into the shelter, they're giving the best version of themselves to the people that they serve, which is the animals in the community. And one of the things we're being able to do now is to be able to separate that by having a dedicated cat area and also a dedicated break room for our folks to be able to go ahead and do. And it's going to be pretty awesome what they'll have there as well. But to Rebecca's point, yes, we'll have right here catios where our cats will be able to go ahead and enjoy the outside environment without running away. So they'll be secure in that regard, a nice quiet area to be able to see the cats as you're walking by, but also go inside and bond with cats and so on and so forth. So a lot of great things with that. We'll have a particular area right here where we're going to highlight some animals, dogs that we want folks to really go ahead and consider. So it's going to be out on Front Street, big, huge, easy way. It's the main hallway when you come in. So you're going to walk by these dogs. You're going to see information about them. And that's a way for us to go ahead and really push those folks for adoption. And we're going to trust our partners to make sure that they get the right animals and push that out in a proper fashion. We'll have some dedicated space that we've never had before for smaller animals, not just mammals, but other animals that you've heard Audrey talk about today. We have to be able to care for our not only canines and felines, but also reptiles, fish, our snakes, other things that we come across. So we'll have a dedicated space for that. We'll also have a maternity ward too, which is going to be really cool to be able to have a dedicated space to be able to do that. And they'll have their own areas where they can have access to sunlight and natural air and not have to go into some of the outside play yards. So since they're going to still be in places where they can quickly get to some fresh air and such and then go back into their dedicated space. Absolutely. Yes, sir. We do fish. We've actually adopted out some fish lately. So there's been some fish that has resided inside the director's office for, gosh, like 3 years or plus. You'd be surprised, and I'll let Audrey go ahead and expand upon that. There's a lot of animals that they find in hotels that have been abandoned there, and sometimes those are the more exotic ones that you guys come across, correct? Yes. So that's where we find some of our most interesting animals that the team has dealt with, is where people abandon them in hotels. So,
What
but
about
yes.
the bigger animals, like horses, donkeys, whatnot? Are there gonna
You're
be-
stealing my thunder, but I'll go ahead and jump to that
Oh, I'm
point.
sorry.
No,
I'm
absolutely. Here's our dedicated barn. This is what's going to make someone right across from me smile even bigger than what she's smiling right now. She, if I can embarrass her for a moment, your heart is bigger than I could possibly imagine. What we went through during this winter period was incredible. Not taking any away from the Lifeline team, but what you did was above and beyond. Christmas Eve, we had a problem. We lost power to a trailer. We lost the ability to go ahead and heat it. As you all remember, it was miserably cold. You were there with some of your team members dragging crates to be able to bring animals into the warmth. And then we did the dance on Christmas Day again when we had all of our water heaters that ruptured and other things along those lines. And we lost heat to the barn and lots of other things that we had. So we cannot wait to say goodbye to this. We'd like to do it like a Viking funeral, hopefully throw some fire into it and just let it burn there. But we think we have a second process for the facility until Alton builds the new jail, which is something that he also has under his purview. But we'd like to be able to leverage the facility in a different fashion for animal welfare in the short term. So that's something that we're looking into. But getting back to your point, we have a dedicated barn here to be able to care for our larger animals. We have a pasture that will be able to be leveraged for those larger animals. We also have the ability, as you can see, to be able to handle chickens, goats and other wildlife in that fashion as well. So really looking forward to having a dedicated space for those larger animals that we care for. Coming back into the facility, we call these fingers, and that's what we learned from our architectural friends as well as our support agencies such as Animal Arts. You'll have 4 major fingers where we'll have dogs that are available for adoption with dog runs that are state-of-the-art as well as play yards. And then we have meet and greet yards all across the back, bonding yards, places for dogs to be able to find their forever homes. And that's something that is not available in our current facility. So there's going to be more space than we could possibly imagine based upon our current situation for finding forever homes and finding places, people to be able to go and bond with them.
Quick question.
Absolutely. Where'd it come from? There you go, Miss Levy.
Is there going to be any kind of soundproofing improvements?
Absolutely. We will no longer have this one big mass housing type of a place. Everything is built based upon latest standards, even down to the lighting that was chosen for it to make sure that whatever sound that it emits is within the range that will not cause any damage to animals. We also will have music piped throughout the facility to be able to go ahead in the cat area to bring down that noise level and to calm it as well. So if we have something there, it's probably because we found if it's loud, it's because it's a type of music that dogs like. Rebecca told me in passing that she went to a shelter once where I think it was like AC/DC or something along those. Oh, okay. So I think it depends upon that, but we really want to have bring that noise level down.
Maybe some dog TV for some of the
We'll see how far we
more
can go with
stressed out
that.
ones.
We do have a budget to work within, but no, we will, this type of housing, this type of services will be able to provide we'll be able to make dogs have a better behavioral outcome so they can become adopted. And that's one of the things that we can't offer here. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to the Lifeline team and I wish I could do something different, but the group housing doesn't work. Having to be able to pull the dogs out to feed them individually to stop that food aggression is not fair to them, is not fair to the animals. And what we're being able to do here is be able to eliminate those type of things. And I think we're all super excited about that.
Are the play yards and the meet and greet areas, are any of those covered?
The ones in these areas would be, these will be open.
I think if you look on that drawing, somewhere it says, and that there's also 55,000 square feet of covered outdoor space. So like in between the fingers, you can see like there's the two green rectangular things. Those are yards, and those are covered. So and then those yards lead out to these additional yards. And I don't know if Matt can zoom in or not, but for those of you who are into the whole playgroup thing and stuff, so I call them airlock doors, but they're safety doors. So you let the animal in one, and then you open the other. So there's, they're not exactly escape proof, but they allow for a lot safer handling of the animals and introductions and stuff like that. So
We'll have to get somebody to donate the misters for the misting for the summertime.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to bring Alton back down to reality based upon the
Do,
budget allocated to this program.
Just a nice fountain.
Donations.
Thank you, Joe. One of the beautiful things about this is the fact that we will no longer have one HVAC system to cover the whole facility. It's a state-of-the-art HVAC system, so we'll mitigate the possibility of having canine influenza spread throughout the whole shelter. We also will have an area designated back here for any animals when it comes to intake to be able to go through a quarantine period before they're brought out into the general community. So an isolation area for animals that are sick, and another thing that makes Belinda smile from ear to ear to be able to have that dedicated area that's not inside the main shelter. So we'll have that to be able to offer the team, as well as that quarantine place. So when you come in, you have to go through quarantine before you're invited into the general population aspect of it. And each one of these fingers has its own separate HVAC system, filtration, the amount of air handling changes per minute that is recommended for a shelter of this size, as well as a animal care area. So what we're super excited about, some of the behind the scene things that you're not going to see, but you're asking questions about the soundproofing, the lighting, the sound emission for those type of things, the HVAC system. A lion's share of our budget has gone to ensuring that we have that latest technology. We do have some other sections inside here, like I was talking about isolation and so on and so forth. This would be where our animal field operations officers would be able to come through a sally port, drop off the animals, bring it into the intake process. And this is another section that we're super excited about, to be able to get our veterinary care team out of a double wide trailer and actually into a fixed facility that can offer the latest in veterinary care. We'll have an x-ray machine there as well that we've not had the luxury of having before, dental care equipment and other things along those lines, surgical capabilities and such. And what we're looking to is to be able to do through this new process is offer the veterinary care, low or no cost veterinary care as well through this location. But at the very minimum is the spay and neutering process that we offer throughout the community. So that will be there. And then we also have that break area that I was sharing with you as well for our partners to make sure they have a place to get away. So this would be behind the scenes. This would be where our folks, our staff would park in a secure designated area. Electrical vehicle charging stations that you see, the ability to do 7 with 27 in the future. It would be awesome one day if the technology gets there. We'd love to see field services go all electric on their vehicles. We're not there yet. So give us some time, but we built the capacity to be able to go ahead and expand our charging so that one day we could get to that point to be able to do all electric vehicles. So that's what would be back here, as well as our loading dock and such, and our waste management for the site. So that's just a quick overview, some renderings down here that you see, and I will show you some photos in a second, if I may. In May, this is the aerial photography of the site. And I want to be able to go ahead and show you in May to where we are in July. Substantial increase in the work that has been done there. The roof is finally there. This is what makes me excited. I've always seen the drawings, but to be able to go ahead and see the grand entrance come to final shape is something that I'm looking forward to. So this is where the public would park. This is where you would enter the building, and this is where the catio area would be over here as well. So they're working on the facade based upon the scaffolding that you see there. And to Rebecca's point, we are looking at introducing art. We want a statement piece out in this area so that when you are adopting an animal, you go out there, you take that picture, we get it on social media, we get folks to go ahead and want to go and come and see this place and want to adopt other animals as well. So lots of great things with that. So public parking here, there will be a drive here to be able to go back out onto the Fulton Industrial Boulevard, and then we'll have clinic access on this side of the building as well with parking along the way. So these are just be some other photographs, aerial photographs. Once a month, we put a drone up to be able to go ahead and capture these. You'll start seeing back here our pasture that's starting to come into form. That'll be one of the last things that actually is accomplished. Right now is still some staging area for all of our equipment. This is where the job site trailer is. Right now, this is how you enter the property and such, and then all of our trade folks store their equipment and everything else there as they're continuing to build this. But you'll see the fingers here. And these skylights is what I was talking about. Those are the locations where isolation animals, the maternity ward and such, where those animals can come out to their play yard, be able to get sunlight, fresh air, and then go right back into their particular areas. Just another couple shots of the backside of the building as well as Fulton Industrial Boulevard, and a little better front view of what this grand entrance is going to look like.
Is there any type of like intercom system for like that space is huge, right? So with staff, like, are you guys gonna continue to do walkies? Like, that's just really huge. So just curious, like, in terms of
There's a couple things can be done. They can leverage a walkie-talkie type of system. The Cisco phone network that we put inside there has the ability to do paging through it. Then there's also other forms of connectivity that they can have, or they can use drums and coconuts and pound them together. Whatever we're to get to at the end of the day that makes sense for the team is what we'll go do. But I think that's probably the least of anyone's concerns. I think we want to be able to go ahead and have the problem of trying to figure out where someone is in the place, because that means we have enough space finally to be able to do that. Just a couple pictures of the front, as well as the logo for the property will be over here. And we have run into a delay. The first major delay of the project has been the weather that we've had. We cannot pave the parking lot. It is killing us. We're still doing work. We're still moving things along, but we cannot pave the parking lot because every time we go and get the soil prepared for the asphalt to come down, we have a thunderstorm. We have to wait for it to dry out. We have to go ahead and re-steamroll it and such. So if everyone could go and pray for a stretch of dry weather, it'll help us to be able to get this parking lot done so we can move some things along. Some inside shots of the facility, of the hallway. Of course, windows are going in. All the duct work is done, all the electrical systems and such. We energized the building, which is really exciting to us. That we were actually, everyone in the construction business could not get a transformer to save their life. And we advocated with Georgia Power. We actually found one. We went ahead and spray painted our name on it, wrapped it at their facility to make sure that no one would take it and use it for another facility. So when we were ready to be able to receive it, the Georgia Power was able to go ahead in their backyard, pull it out, and drop it down there. So we do have that energized. We do have the HVAC system on, but of course there's no windows at this moment, so it's just moving fresh air throughout the facility. We're not really chilling it at this moment in time, but what we're trying to do is get ready for the commissioning process. We want to make sure all the equipment works so that when it's officially time to hand it over to us, we worked out those kinks as well. You'll see some of the things that Rebecca was referring to about the animals coming from one side of the building to the outdoor area, to then be taking advantage of the outdoor play space and the dog runs. The foundation for the barn has been poured. One of the later stages would be actually erecting the barn in that particular location. With a mock-up is done of what one of the runs would look like, and you'll see the doorway that's there, the guillotine-style door that will take them from the inside to the outside space, as well as what the outside space will look like as they continue to go and put the facade on and such. We have asked Lifeline to come out there and take a look at this, to throw their 2 cents in and about, is it going to work? Is it going to make it through a couple years of service? One of the things that we've had the luxury of is doing our facility after DeKalb County. So we've learned a lot from DeKalb County of what type of materials do not work in these type of situations and what we should be doing to make it a shelter that can last the future. Cobb County is actually leveraging our expertise and experiences to build their shelter. So they're actually going to be putting an RFP out this summer. I know there's not much time left in the summer, but they studied our facility, met with the architectural firm as well as contracting the contractors as they get ready to put theirs out. So there is a trend here that you're seeing in animal welfare in Metro Atlanta is bringing up our shelters to what the latest and greatest needs is for the animals that we serve. Absolutely, thank you. I was about to use that as my transition, sir. We expect more awards to come, but one of the first awards that we actually received is from an engineering award from our civil engineers for this particular facility. Normally, CHOA and whatever engineering firm touches anything that's worth Children's Hospital wins an award. We are grateful that this year that we actually got an award with the engineering firm with CHOA with their new hospital build, but the first time ever that someone else had tied with that. So the reward was received from Lowe Engineering. Commissioner Lowe, way back in the day, used to be with us, and of course he sold his engineering firm before he passed and such, but Lowe Engineering was a subcontractor that did receive that award and did an incredible job with the civil engineering piece of this. It was recognized by their peers for that particular work. So where we are right now is, of course, getting into Q3. So we have actually, if I could take it a step back, we started providing a snapshot of what the new costs would look like to our cities. So we're slowly going through that process. We've met with our 4 to 5 largest consumers of the program to make sure that they know what their costs would look like going forward. Just for your awareness, the two major ones, of course, is the city of Atlanta and the city of South Fulton. And then right after that, it does change. It could be the city of East Point, Sandy Springs, so on and so forth. So it does fluctuate, but the two major consumers of the program is the city of Atlanta and the city of South Fulton. So they are aware of what we anticipate costs are going to look like in year one of a new IGA with them, as well as in year 5. One of the things that they have been blessed with in the process is that they have not seen an increase in their costs in 5 years. I don't think any of us in this room live our lives in a way where we have not seen an increase in any of the costs that we experience personally or professionally. So the municipalities have not seen a single increase. And now it gets to the point that there is going to be an increase, but because we have to right size the program, we have to right size the share based upon the current costs. So there will be a significant increase. All the good news is things that I pass on. If someone is frustrated, I tell them go talk to Alton so that he could go ahead and bear that because, of course, he loves to go ahead and handle conflict. Right, sir? Thank you, sir.
Just to add to that, you made the point. We haven't had an increase in 6 years. Even when we started, we were paying as a county less per capita for animal services than virtually any other major city that we benchmark against. And so, for a number of reasons, it was time, and the facility gives us the actual inflection point to be able to say, okay, how do we raise the game in terms of taking care of the pets in Fulton. And so we've had a couple of discussions that, they've gone okay. Nobody likes to have someone come in and say, by the way, your costs are going up by 250%. But it is one of those things where I think the folks we talk to appreciate the reasons why, and they also appreciate how many people in their communities this is important to. So it'll take us, there'll be a few bumps along the way, but I think for the most part, the folks we've talked to so far have been receptive.
And if the board does like to hear it, the next meeting we should be in a place where we can share with you what the new allocation model would look like. The RFPs will be done. The two major RFPs that we're actually trying to finalize right now is with an operating partner as well as a maintenance partner for the facility. So once those two pieces of the puzzle come together, we'll be able to figure out what that new cost would look like for year one, and we're going to build about 3 to 5% increase per year into that model as well, so that the cities know every year they can anticipate this level of an increase. And what we've shown them is what our best estimate is based upon what their current consumption of the program is. So we changed our model. When I came on, we were billing city, for their previous year's worth of use of the system. Didn't make much sense to me. So we changed to a real-time billing process. Every quarter, the municipalities get a bill broken down by month, and you'll actually see the call volumes associated with that, and they can see where their dollars are going, and they can ask specific questions. And from time to time, we have to sit down with them if they have more detailed questions. But that's what our role is, to be able to go ahead and be as transparent as possible. That's something that I've been asked to go ahead and achieve with Alton, and everything we're doing is to get to that point so that there is no one out there that doesn't understand how this cost is, how do we come up with it, and how is it properly shared with everyone. So that's what's actually occurring in Q3. We'll be doing a tour for our city leaders, mayors, and city managers. That will be next week, Friday. We'll welcome them to the facility at 9 o'clock in the morning to be able to go and do a specific tour for them so they can go ahead and share the excitement because, of course, like Alton said, they're going to see an increase in cost, and it allows them to be able to go back and talk to their city councils members as this new IGA goes in front of them for discussion and final approval. We talked about the vendor contracts. What we're looking for in mid to late September is to send the IGAs out to them for them to put in front of their councils to be ratified and to send back. I know Alton always loves to go ahead and move my opening date up even sooner, and but we're still shooting for November 1st. We're looking at the month of September and October to be where we're doing punch-out lists and getting everyone ready to be able to bring the first animals in. And what we're doing is shooting for a November 1st ribbon cutting. So that's where all of our work is going towards. That's where all of our timelines are going towards. And as long as Mother Nature works with us, I think we should be able to hit that mark for November 1st. The IGAs will come back in the month of December to us, and we'll transition to the new facility in the month of November and December, and then January 1, we want to be fully functioning in that new facility and lighting that pyre over at the facility that's from 1978, like you've heard about. So with that being said, I would, Madam Chair, I'd like to also go ahead and offer the board a tour as well. I do have to advise you all that based upon the construction work that's going on there, it'll have to be 3:30 or later in the daytime. We had to stop for work for the city leader meeting, and they remind me all the time that I jeopardize the timeline when I do those type of things. So we can do that. We'd like to try to consolidate if possible to be able to offer you guys that tour at the facility. But once again, we're looking at about 3 o'clock or 3:30 in the afternoon to be able to welcome the board for a tour of the site. It'll be a hard hat tour, so it is still under construction, as you can see from the photos there. So hopefully you guys can discuss that, and we work with you on that.
Just for a point of clarification, what's an IGA?
Intergovernmental agreement, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
It gets to the acronyms. We use them freely, and I should have went ahead and please I ask you all to hold us accountable. We use acronyms all the time. Tell us to go ahead and spell them out for everyone to make sure everyone is aware of that.
How soon can we have that tour?
A week. Actually, let me go ahead and take that back. Probably 2 weeks. I have to go ahead and double check with the construction team. So we should be able to accomplish by the end of August, the beginning of September. Yes. Madam Chair, I'll open up to any questions.
There's no other questions. I think the next item on the agenda is, I don't know if there's any open questions from the floor. I know we have some members of the public present. No questions there? There's a question. Do we need a mic?
Yeah, there's a mic right there.
If you don't mind, for the viewing public.
So hi, my name's Ellie, and I've been volunteering with Lifeline and fostering for almost 2 years. We have built a really awesome community of volunteers and fosters, and we're really close with the staff, and they work so hard every day for all of these animals. And I also work in healthcare, and in healthcare, you learn a lot about focusing on prevention and wellness instead of emergency management. And I feel like the shelter is constantly in crisis mode. They're working short-staffed. Everybody is so dedicated, but they're burnt out. So, and I know that pets are viewed as property in Fulton County, but I think all of us are just so concerned. We have this great new facility, and it's great, and we're excited about it, but DeKalb had a new facility, and they're overpopulated, and their volunteers are some of them are rallying to create a bigger facility and add more, and it's like adding more kennels doesn't mean that dogs are going to get adopted quicker. So I'm just wondering, like, in the long term, looking forward, like, what is Fulton County, is there a plan to, take on spay neuter, backyard breeding laws, things like that? Because I feel like that's, ultimately what needs to happen, because people are surrendering their own dogs that they breeded, like when their one dog doesn't get adopted, it goes to the shelter. I mean, there's just so many stories, I'm sure everybody knows. And, I'm newer to animal welfare, so I'm not as educated, so, forgive me if this is like a topic that's talked about a lot, but I don't know, I think a lot of us in the field that, I'm there once or twice a week and I have a foster dog at my home almost at all times. So what, is there a plan for the county?
I mean, this is something I'm going to ask Audrey and Rebecca to go ahead and weigh in on as well. This is something that I don't think any of us know what the current environment is like, because it's never been that way before. We've never had a time where I've spoke to the team that we haven't emptied the shelter on a Black Friday event right after Thanksgiving. We've normally had folks just lining up the street to be able to go ahead and adopt a dog for the holidays. And I think this last time it was tumbleweeds and crickets at times during that particular moment. So I believe there's a lot of things that are happening with the economy that's impacting this. I think a lot of folks are having a hard enough time just putting food on their own table, let alone trying to take on an animal. So there's a lot of unknowns. A lot of the things that we try to do to have different types of programs to move the adoption process hasn't moved the needle like we've seen in the past. We've had success with moving some animals to other parts of the country that have some vacancies in their shelter to try to do some adoptions in that way, but that's not a long-term solution in any way, shape, or form. So that's why this advisory board is here. I appreciate you bringing that up, because we're looking for fresh ideas to address the problem. We don't have the magic bullet. I know that we're looking at updating the ordinance to try to take into some of these new things. But to your point, yes, we could go ahead and triple the size of the shelter. We'll fill it up in the first month. Totally get that. Department of Agriculture has warned us about that as well. So we're best friends with those folks because they're constantly knocking on our door, reminding us of that fact. So we're looking for new and better ways. And absolutely, if you could grab the mic, though, I appreciate it. And to your point, yes, I worked as a paramedic in New Orleans for 20 plus years, and we used to get frustrated taking patients to a hospital that didn't need to go to a
Yeah, I worked in the ER for 10 years, so I really related to that, because I agree.
Yeah, the mobile integrated health is something that Rebecca and I spoke about. The human side of it is what I know. The animal side of it is what her and her team knows, and we're trying to go and look for innovative ideas.
And so my question is also, because I've seen these, and I don't know financial aspects, but it costs $40 a day per dog, what they say, to take care of dogs in the shelter, which is what I've seen from posts. So I just feel like if we could put money into whatever legal things in the front end, I mean, it's going to be a lot of upfront costs to try to create change, but in the end we would have, hopefully, I don't know, I'm just trying to be optimistic of ways to look forward. And I know it's like a financial thing, and I totally understand that, but we're spending a lot of money taking care of all these dogs and whatnot. So
I'm sorry, please. Add a couple of things if I can. It's partly financial, but it's really complex, right? Because you got spay and neutering, you've got the breeding, you've got dog fighting, and it is when we look at some of these things, we think about, well, what's the short and medium term opportunity, and then what's the long term? And you're absolutely right. In the long term, we got to catch up with the spay and neutering that they have in places elsewhere in the country, right? And the fact of the matter is, in the South, we just don't do a good enough job. And I mean, it's just the way it is, right? So you have to fix some of these things, and some of that's going to be education, right? And it's like having guns, right? So it's a Southern thing, right? I don't know if we'll ever fix it, right? So, or change it. I shouldn't say fix it, because but. However, I will say that some of these opportunities, in my view, are more as much regional as it is Fulton County. And I know that some of the counties, and Matt and I talked about this, and my biggest disappointment is that Fulton and DeKalb and Cobb and Marietta haven't stepped up together and said we share common issues. And I will tell you that getting legislation passed with 4 or 5 of the counties is it's a lot easier than one county stepping up. The counties figuring out how they could potentially share learnings from dealing with canine flu is a lot easier and better than one county and another county trying to fit it. So I think that we have an opportunity, because I truly believe that if we address this as an Atlanta region, we would be able to move the needle more effectively on things like legal issues. We'd be able to perhaps share some of the learnings, and quite frankly, we might be able to invest in something that, Fulton County might not be able to invest in a big facility to deal with whatever it might be, medical stuff or facilities. I'm a big fan. My dream when I retire is to start a retirement home for senior dogs, right? I tell people that all the time. But because we do have animals that for whatever reason may not be adoptable, and may not because they're seniors, there may be health issues or whatever. So there are a number of things, but for one county to do that is a challenge. But if you gather together, so I do think that as part of what we need to be thinking about, it's not the total solution, is how do we marshal the resources of this new facility in Cobb, DeKalb. The problem with DeKalb is they reduced their footprint between what was initially designed and what they actually built before it actually got constructed. And so, to your point, it was obsolete the day that it opened. We're trying not to make that mistake here, but I do think we have some opportunities to step back and say, how can we do some things differently in the region that taps into all of the shared problems and perhaps allows us to share some of the required investment.
And we have some opportunities in Fulton that we don't have in DeKalb. So Lifeline operates DeKalb as well. And the systems are different. In DeKalb, it's a model that I call a bifurcated model. So Lifeline operates the shelter, but the county operates enforcement. And there is a gigantic difference in being able to manage the animal population when you have a unified approach. So we have the ability in Fulton to be able to address things before they come into the shelter. The shelters have very similar intake. Fulton serves a lot more people. It has a lot more calls. We have more officers. But we're able to manage that process better through our relationships with the community. And that we don't have that opportunity in DeKalb. So that's one reason. What Alton says is very true, that they counties do this all the time. It's called value engineering. It's probably some of you have heard of it, but they take this amazing plan and then they cut costs, right? And DeKalb did that somewhat with a vengeance, really actually cutting little bits of square feet out of that shelter. I mean, I was part of the process. I've been a part of both processes, so I can tell you it is night and day what happened in the construction of the DeKalb shelter and the way it was approached by the county. And here, I mean, the builders would kind of pull us aside and say, this galvanized stuff would be a lot cheaper than that aluminum stuff. And the architects would say, oh no, and everybody would kind of flock together and go, don't value engineer this. And it's really stunning, I think, and it's a credit to Fulton County. Is like they hired experts and they listened to them. And I probably shouldn't complete my thought on that, but it is unusual for that to happen. So we do really have a different operating model. We have a different approach. We have a very different opportunity here, and so we're hoping to continue that. So it makes a big difference in how you are able to position the service, and if the service is positioned as very punitive, and this kind of addresses some of your legislation. There are an awful lot of people that say if we could have mandatory spay-neuter, we wouldn't have this problem. There's not a way to enforce mandatory spay-neuter, and there's not a reason to penalize people who want to do the right thing. If there's no access, they can't do the right thing. This is a facility where we can provide a lot more access if we have an open relationship with the community, and we can have that open relationship because it's a very holistic service offering. And just like, people are starting to think, okay, who can we partner with? Who can we who can we talk to provide a support system for the entire family, which includes the pets. And that's really a very different scenario than how the service is operated really currently, because we are limited by the facility, but also how we're able to operate in DeKalb. So there are some strikes against them in DeKalb, and I think that that county is working to rectify that too. And as Matt said, I don't think any of us could have predicted this. I mean, Lifeline has kind of led the charge to convert facilities that were designed for death into life-saving facilities. And, we've enjoyed a lot of success. And the last 2 years have been just miserable. So if that's when you came and got involved with this, it's like, yeah, I know it looks pretty grim, because this staff is worn out. It's like it is just nonstop, and then you add the flu on top of it, and and our own staff, wages have changed, and everyone is stretched further, and so we're. I don't want to put all the eggs in one basket and say this new building is going to solve everything, but it really does open up some opportunities that we haven't had. So,
I have a quick question. Is there an opportunity for the board?
Microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. Is there an opportunity for the board members outside of this setting to work with you to see what partnerships we can put together for preventative measures to help those families who do have animals, and to help with cost of the facilities?
So I would welcome that, and I think there's nothing Audrey likes more than to have those conversations. But I think we kind of look to the county as what you distinguish as your work as a board, but anybody is welcome to volunteer, and we have volunteers involved in all those programs as well. So we'd love to have those conversations, and to the extent they can become an official recommendation of the board, that's something that I guess has to be done in this setting, but we're happy to have one-on-one conversations anytime.
Are there any more questions from members of the public? I guess with that, do I need a call for a motion to adjourn?
Before you do that, ma'am, I just wanted to go ahead and, we have Q4 coming up. I don't know if you wanted to make a decision today about a potential date for a meeting, or if you wanted to be able to table that and do an email with the group back and forth, maybe like a doodle poll to be able to pick something along those lines. But I would recommend to schedule a Q4 meeting sooner rather than later, if possible.
Yeah, we can do that through a doodle poll through email.
Yes, ma'am.
So with that, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Just make sure you turn your microphones off, please.